Alrighty, well, without further ado, I would like to introduce to everyone Mr. John Ford from the Mandiant team. John, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jen. How y'all doing tonight? Y'all been having a good time today? This morning, I'm sorry I wasn't here for the earlier part of it, but no, this is great space. Actually, I kind of like it, right? So, coming from Mandiant, we're really, very security focused. A lot of us are working for the government, right? We kind of know what a government building looks like, and this ain't it, right? So, no, this is really exciting. So this is really nice. Thank y'all for having us here. If any of y'all have questions about anything, this is a conversation. Honestly, we have PowerPoints, so there's something behind us and it kind of looks really cool. But this is really a conversation. So at any time, you have a question about something, we will open it up at the end. But if you have a question right there and you don't want to lose it, just raise your hand and we'll get it going, okay? So I'm John Ford. So I joined Mandiant in 2018. I'm a retired FBI executive. I was working for Cyber Division at the time, working a lot of our counter nation state operations that we were doing at the time, right? And even including, some of the criminal groups that you're gonna hear about, right? Because there's still associations. There's kind of a misnomer about that still, that, criminal groups kind of act independently and nation state actors act independently, and that's really not true, okay? There is cohesion in what is done, and there's quite frankly lessons learned that each time that they learn how to attack. So, there we go. So I've been in this field for a very long time, right? Back a long time ago, right? And this is really, I'm gonna probably age myself at some point during this conversation, but the Bureau didn't have a cyber division program. They didn't have a cyber program at the time. In fact, the first one was called NIPSI back in the day. It was National Infrastructure Protection, right? And that was really kind of kicking off of what does that look like? What do we mean by, how are we going to protect, and what does cyber mean? And it really obviously grew very, very, very fast, right? It's in everything that we do today, right? Quite frankly, the way it's morphed, some of us didn't even envision, what would it be? And if we think about today and today's threats and attacks and how you're trying to really secure networks, what is that going to even look like 5 years from now? In a very short time, or even 2 or 3 years from now. Things are evolving at a much quicker pace today. So let's talk about it a little bit, how can we help you, right? That's really what we're here to talk about, and just inform so y'all can ask good questions. So just for a show of hands, just who doesn't know a lot about Mandiant? Here. Okay, that's a fair question, okay? So Mandiant was built about 18 years ago. Kevin Mandia, our CEO, came from the Air Force, okay? And he saw a need, right? The government, for what it can do, right? I'm former FBI, right? We had limitations on what we were allowed to do to help victims who became susceptible to these acts, right? And he's like, I think we can do some things better. And he started Mandiant at the time. And probably best known, and y'all should look it up, it was a phenomenal report, but he's the one that had published what's called APT1, okay? Now this was groundbreaking at the time because, we always heard, especially from the federal, national level government space, we always heard that, there's all these nation state actors and we should be wary. But that's about all we got. They delivered this malware, they did this bad thing, but we didn't know who they were. We had no idea. And he published a report, and it had the pictures of the actual hackers, the building that they were working out in China, all of their infrastructure that they were using around the world to attack everyone else. Now, that was groundbreaking at the time. No one had done that. You should take a look at the report. From that, many other security companies really glommed onto that. The government became much more aggressive in saying, we need to do something about this. And then the US government said, what, our first volley will be, we're going to do these sets of indictments, right? Let's let everybody in the world kind of know what's going on, okay? So part of that was they identified all the infrastructure, the techniques, and the people that were doing this, because, as close as we're moving obviously into this AI, ML, robotic world, right? Today is still people with hands on a keyboard. They're still doing all of these things. Make no mistake, they still do it. So what we do as Mandiant is we do, best known for instant response. That's how we really started. We do as a business over 250,000 hours of incident response per year, right? That's a lot, right? I don't even know how many years that is, but it's a lot of years within 1 year, right? And then we start off, well, let's take it a step further. How can we actually protect and give recommendations and harden before something bad happens? So our proactive services, our red teaming and so forth, start up. But that wasn't enough for Kevin either, because he wanted to make sure that people were actually protected 24/7, right? So we started up what we call managed defense, right? Where we have someone that watches networks 24/7 and can stop attacks. And if they go into part of a breach or breach, they can have a rapid response immediately. While everyone else is asleep, we're still taking care of it. And that started some of the first managed offerings out there, right? And then the risk and the insider threat programs and all the other programs were built around Mandiant. And then we got into the platform, right? How do we identify these threats and these vulnerabilities so you don't become susceptible to them? So let's think about that. Now we report and we provide this out, and there'll be another one coming out very soon called M-Trends. If you've never read it, okay, it's everything that we have seen from every breach that we've responded to in the year. There's a lot of good information that comes out there. We put it out annually. It's free, by the way, okay? So when we look back in 2022, right, and everywhere I've gone, we still have these kind of, what is the conception of what are the most successful attacks out there, right? So let's take it in a few big buckets. So just by show of hands, all right? From a successful attack perspective, is it, and you can raise your hands for this, is it phishing? Is it external vulnerabilities? Or is it misuse of credentials, right? So by show of hands, who thinks phishing is the number one successful vector? Okay, all right. What about external vulnerabilities? Okay, couple. Misuse of credentials. Okay, can't vote twice. I saw that, all right. So phishing is only successful 11% of the time. 89% of the time, it's external vulnerabilities, then misuse of credentials. Why? Because the adversaries want to be able to reside in a network as long as they can without detection. Ransomware, 3 days they're in your network without detection at all. They're finding out who your security team is by name. They find all of your incident response plans. They find all of the key data they're about to steal. They identify your backups and your response procedures. And then they very quickly execute, almost with like clockwork, on Friday evening. Evening because they're up, you're asleep, your teams are gone, they've gone home for the weekend, and then everybody's scrambling for these alerts. Now in ransomware, it's not even ransomware anymore, it's multifaceted extortion, right? Because these adversaries want as much money as they can get, and they want to provide much value to their consumer, right? They're a business. So when you think about this, they're going to first steal the data, then they're going to lock your system. You get to pay to get your system back, and you get to pay to get your data back. Hence the multifaceted extortion. And make no mistake at all, your first indication and the world's first indication that a breach occurred is because the adversary let the world know. It's not you. The majority of cases will become public without your knowledge by them. When we think about exploitation within the government, some of these CVEs have been out there for a very, very long time. And they are still today exploited, right? So just by show of hands, who in here has an intelligence program that is built into their security stack? Anybody? Okay. Why is that important? Why would you have, let me ask you, why would you have an intelligence program built into your security stack?
Because you need to be aware of how the actors are changing what they're going after, where they be looking for you.
It's exactly right. Can you protect yourself from everybody and everything at all times? Nope. Can't. I can guarantee you, without a shadow of a doubt, that old statement, it's not if, but when, is absolutely true. We talk to many organizations, obviously, every day. I run the IR teams for the government practice for Mandiant globally. And they exactly want to know exactly what he said. What do they have as a value? Where is it kept? And what can I monetize or can somehow transact, whatever that transaction can be. It doesn't have to be money, right? Especially when we think about nation state actors, right? It could be intellectual property, can be access, could be reconnaissance for further actions, but they go after you. So if you can't protect, like boiling the ocean kind of metaphor, if you can't protect against everything, which is an impossibility, you have to protect against knowing who's most likely to target you and what they're targeting, so you can actually have an active defense that's intelligence informed. Now, you can cut that problem down to something that you can actually manage. So when we think about government practices and government agencies and departments, you know, what are the things they look for? What are they going after? What can they monetize? But more importantly to them, they know. And just tell me if I'm wrong, but not every government agency is funded the same way. Would we agree with that? Some get more, some get less. Some are more mature, some are less mature. Some have larger teams, some have smaller teams. And not every agency even works off of the same EDR for endpoint detection. They have all kinds of different that may be in there, right? So how do you have a consistent and coordinated way to respond to these attacks all the time? Can the city CIO or the state CIO or the county CIO see everything that's going in all the departments at one time through a single pane? Nope. How do you prioritize? Right? What are the most critical services when we start looking at, you know, county or state or city levels? Have they all been identified? Who comes up first? If there's a critical breach and it's happening against multiple agencies, because that happens, how does that response look like? How has it been exercised? What's the plan? How often do you actually exercise it? Right? These are things that you really want to do at least on a quarterly basis. So most people have never seen what a criminal enterprise looks like. So we kind of go through this a little bit. We talked about that they're people, right? But most often these people really don't know each other except online. They've really never met each other. And they're in multiple countries. It's not like they all sit in the same neighborhood or the same city or even the same country, right? And it's no different than any other criminal enterprise that's ever existed since time began, right? You have some that are there for reconnaissance. Who should I go after? You have the others that have got information about these are the easiest to go after and why, or we already have a foothold, we should go there. You also have the ones that say, hey, this is the actual stuff that we want to steal. I'm going to build the tools over here. I'm going to do the actions over here. Then when it's stolen, you have a data problem, right? The more computer breaches you do, you actually have a data issue, right? How are they going to store all of it? And then who's going to run the money? How are they going to disperse the money? This is no different than any other criminal enterprise ever existed out there. And this is really one of those things you have to look at. That's an as-a-service model today. They all create these capabilities and sell them as a service, just like you are trying to procure different SaaS or PaaS services. They do the exact same model because they can make better money at it. You know, when we think about ransomware, by far, 2021 through most of 2022, Lockbit took it, right? Now that's starting to change, right? We're seeing different ransomware actors that are taking advantage of agencies right now, like this second, right now, and they're taking advantage of other organizations and they're trying to figure out what to do. And it's a whole different group, but look at where they're going, right? I mean, I was a police officer back in my first time, right? Back in the early 90s. And it's like, why would they go after this, right? I've seen actually nation state actors actually go after police departments. It's kind of interesting, especially even like jails too. I was kind of interested in that. But think about the interesting information you can get there, right? I mean, we haven't even got to the state actors yet, but all these have really interesting data points. Things that are immediately consumable. extortion, blackmail, theft, monetization of the data. If you just think like just pure criminal, not that you have to do anything else with it, but just purely monetize it. But if we think of espionage, now we're talking a new game, right? By far, and does everybody understand what the acronyms of APT or UNC or FIN mean? Okay, so APT means Advanced Persistent Threat. These are your nation state actors, okay? Think of countries like Russia. In this case, APT 29 is Russian, okay? Now this naming convention started with Kevin Mandiant. No other group had ever figured out. Even when I was in the Bureau, we had code names for everything. Nothing that was consistent, but we had code names for them. But he started. It's called APT1. Still out on the internet, right? Google it, find it, read it. It's a phenomenal read. This is the stuff that security researchers and security companies do for a living. They make you aware. They help you. But APT 29 is up there. Why do we think today, APT 29, Russian nation state actor, why are they top of the list? Any guesses of what's going on in the world in, let's say, eastern side of Europe? Right? This is the core group that's been tasked with the mission space to go after a certain country. Absolutely. Their job is to cripple during a time of actual kinetic conflict, and also to dissuade others from believing that they're actually doing it. So you start seeing in adjacent countries and adjacent areas of this conflict that messaging is going out that's saying that this is not really happening. Or it's happening, but there's a real reason that affects you in their native languages, while they're supporting kinetic operations to disable the ability to have energy, comms, and transportation. In wartime conflict, those are your three key pillars. If you don't have energy, you can't talk. If you don't have comms, you can't communicate to your teams. And if you don't have transpo, how do you get your troops from one place to another, and how do you get the civilians out of there? Right? This is public, and you can read about it, but Mandiant responded. We were actually there to protect against the Russian aggression. Now think about that for a minute and what it means to you. Right now, today, if something happens somewhere else in the world, right, because we're in many countries in the world, we're doing 250,000 hours of incident response, which is orders of magnitude greater than probably most companies out there. When we're looking at that, and we find the newest technique that was just used, how long will it be before you know about it? And how long will it be before it's ingested so it can protect you? And how do you know that you've not already been compromised? They didn't think they'd been compromised. But in some indications show that Russia had been there since 2012, pre-positioned for conflict. You pre-position before conflict. You don't, when war is declared, that's not the time when aggression starts. Never. So how do you get that information to protect you? Somebody. How do you get that information? It's hard. Maybe you're relying on, did it go through the MSI SAC, right? Did my local DHS rep, my FBI rep send me a digital copy of something, right? A PDF of something. But now I gotta load it and I gotta see it and kind of test it, and do I know? When Log4j happened, SolarWinds happened, did your CIOs, did your C-suite, did your peers ask, are we susceptible? Can this happen to us? How'd you check? What were your answers? I know many CIOs, and they had no way to check because it was something they saw, the CEO saw it in the news. He asked the question, or the mayor asked the question, or the governor asked the question, and they didn't have an answer. You should. CIOs and CISOs should be able to answer this core question. Can I be breached? Yes, no. Not an if, not possibly, not kind of. It's a yes, no answer. And you should be able to have the answer. How do you do that? You have to validate what you have, right? You have to be able to take those actions that someone collected somewhere. So when we do an incident response, as an example, everything goes up into our capability cloud, and it immediately goes to every customer Mandiant has in minutes. And we can immediately see if they're susceptible right now and put up defense mechanisms for it. That's how you do it, because you're talking about an idea where you're at a single agency or department, and you're trying to go against a nation who has a lot more resources, or groups who are spread around the world who you don't even know who they are. How do you protect that? When we start talking about here, so on this one, APT 41 is Chinese. Now, does everybody remember when USA herds happened? Do y'all even know what happened there, right? So it's not often that this happens, but nation state actors actually went into government systems to steal their money and move it to China. Took government money because they had access and moved it. Now, I don't know how everything recovers from that, right? I don't know how an agency says, oh, I really like my money back, or the insurance going to indemnify them, but this was kind of different. They didn't steal intellectual property. They weren't stealing information. It was money. Anybody have anything to do with ICS SCADA, OT in here at all? Okay. Anybody ever heard of Colonial Pipeline at all? Who was the company that responded and got the East Coast going again? They called us. Crippled by a ransomware attack, the entire East Coast of the United States shut down. Every government agency was trying to support very well, but there we were. How do we get the East Coast going again? Now this became interesting because you start looking at what does that mean? How did they get in? What does an OT attack look like, right? Operational technology or ICS SCADA systems, right? And there's kind of a misnomer about it, right? There are protections built, there are type of endpoint detections that support, but when we start looking at SCADA and OT systems, there's a problem called 99. 99% of all the attacks against OT networks start on the IT side. Okay? Now, what we found really interesting, and this is where we're getting back to intelligence and why this matters, is this is the first instance that we ever saw of in-controller. Why does it matter? Right? Does anybody know what in-controller is and why it's significant? Okay. It was the first malware built as a framework, designed to morph on demand. You can't write signatures against something that morphs. You can't use hashes, you can't use any indicators whatsoever because it morphs. This was deployed specifically against Schneider systems. We worked with Schneider to identify so they could try to get out to everybody in the world that was using these systems so that they would not become susceptible to attack or pre-positioning for the future. If you're securing things like water, transportation, energy, even down to elevator systems that use OT networks, you have to secure the IT space first. Who do you have on your staff that's an expert in protecting OT? Do y'all fund that? Who's doing that? What kind of plans do you have in place to do this? Telecommunications. All right. Anybody deal with protecting elections at all? Okay. Now, elections is kind of a fun space. I have that as well. We protect about 250 jurisdictions around the United States every cycle, right? Usually they have big 2-year cycles, but in some areas we do every election, right? Either whole of state, municipality, whatever, right? Now, just to be clear, and I want to make sure so I don't want to scare anybody here, to date, there has not been a successful compromise of an election system, period. Now, with that said, There was a researcher that figured this out a long time ago, and they actually were able to show that it could happen. But in reality, in the real world, it's never happened. Okay? But when it's time for us to get on board and we bring all these in, we actually have an instant response area, we call it ESOC, that we're dealing with all of these elections in one space and protecting them. It's a fun time, right? Because you can imagine there's a lot of pressure for about 24 hours, right? We already have been there for months ahead of time, pre-positioning everything we're doing, threat hunting within that, right? You want to do, does anybody do threat hunts in their own environment? One, awesome. Who builds your playbooks? Okay. Who runs the threat hunts? Awesome. What do you get out of it? Like, what's your, if you had to say, like, this is the number one benefit I get out of it, what do you get? What? Absolutely. No one knows your environment better than you, period. An adversary doesn't know your environment as good as you do, or at least shouldn't, right? But knowing your environment and knowing what's not right is an instant trigger, right? If you're hunting your environment and you notice something is off, these adversaries are not out there just deploying malware for fun. They usually don't, if they can get away with it, right? But if you can threat hunt your environment and know the techniques of the adversary and you know to look for those, you're way ahead of the game. Okay, I'm gonna try to get through this, and I have a problem with, I speak a lot. So, who's moving down the zero trust path right now? 1, 2, awesome. Okay, let me just point this out. That train left the station last year, okay? Zero trust is something that you should already be implementing now, okay? The pervasiveness of an attack and its ability to spread laterally or vertically during an attack and how quick it can go, right, places huge exposures today, right? We live in a world that actually transacts on data, right? Back in the day, you had, the transactions were considered, this has to be monetary, this has to be some kind of valuable data. Is in its purest form is what everything runs on today. I was just talking to an agency within the last couple of weeks, and they're like, yeah, we have all these protections. Like, we protect we have everything set up. Like, it's completely protected. We're good. It's like, great. What do you do for your employees? Tell me about your insider threat program. Do you know the most insider threat capabilities today in actions are actually enabled actions, right? It's not purely an employee. They've been compromised to use their legitimate access, right? Legitimate access rules the landscape, period. Every employee has it, and every adversary wants it. Did you ever see the one about Tesla? Did you read up on what happened to them? This employee happens to go to lunch, normal thing. Actual, real criminal bad guy from Russia flies to the US, finds this guy, sees he's wearing a nice Tesla shirt, offers him money right there. Put this USB drive in this specific place. Now, luckily, they had this great training program about, hey, if you ever see something, say something, and he did, which brought in the Bureau, which led to an arrest, right? But it gets really close. Tell me about the number of people y'all can tell me about the talents programs. Does anyone know what the talents programs are? Okay. Talents programs are designed as a recruitment for espionage, period. Every country has one. But they're specifically used on how to make placement of researchers, especially in key areas, so they can exfiltrate information. I'll actually watch one that came over. This university hired this person. Clock ticked down less than 90 seconds. Less than 90 seconds having the first access was uploading everything to a Chinese cloud. Every single piece of research of this university. That quick. And they had no knowledge of it. They saw a video, because there was video in the room, but they had no detections on exfiltration. How many of y'all watch the data that's going out? By show of hands. Who clocks the data that's going out? Same two, right? A breach is about taking something. It's not just about getting in, right? If we're not spending as much time understanding what's leaving us, right? It's kind of like being inside that fort, right? And you still have people behind you, right? And that data is going right past you. Do consider about the destruction of data. During the first volleys of the conflict that Russia did, they disguised ransomware as actually destructive malware. So they had little clocks going off saying, ransom's going to go off, etc. So they didn't respond. They were calling people. It wasn't. It was wiping everything. Designed not to make those machines recoverable. The only thing they could do was buy new machines. They were completely destroyed. Are you prepared for that attack today? This is not just nation states doing this. The nation states, because now this is in the wild, the criminals have picked this up. Do you think that they would not use it? I mean, how many of us would love to go out and just spend more millions of dollars and put brand new hardware in and start all over? It's not an easy discussion. So what detection and capabilities do you have? Best practices, before, during, and after, right? How many of y'all actually prepare, harden, and exercise? Do you test your controls on a regular basis at least every month? Do you validate? Okay, let's start attack surface. How many of y'all look at your attack surface and know the current vulnerabilities right now at least once a week? And you mitigate them. When is the last time, we'll start from attack surface, like when's the last time somebody scanned the outside of your network for current vulnerabilities? Has it been, we'll work backwards, 1 year? Anybody for 1 year? 6 months? I'll go the other direction, 2 years. This is super critical. The number one way that adversaries get into your network is through the external vulnerabilities that they can see. That's the public facing to the adversary. If they see it, they will exploit it. You have the opportunity today to have tomorrow's breach report on your desk and know what to fix. Why not take that opportunity? I'm betting that everybody in here has all kinds of different vendors inside your network. Mandiant is vendor independent. We have been acquired by Google, but we are a completely vendor independent company. I don't care what cloud you use, I don't care what EDR you use, we don't care. We're here to provide an opinion about that security. But I can tell you, when we try to validate networks is to see, we actually run real malware from one point to another. Only 9% of the time the attack made it to the SIM. 91% miss rate every single time. Can you live with that 91% miss rate? Is that an acceptable risk? When's the last time you validated the controls? When's the last time that you did a compromise assessment to ensure that you haven't previously been compromised? In over 70% of our attacks, we find at least 2 or more adversaries in the network, and only 1 was detected. When's the last time you ensured that the last people that may have done a red team didn't leave their tools in your system and they're still whitelisted, so they're available to the adversary to use without your detection? Anticipate the threats. Know who's attacking you. All of y'all should have some kind of EDR. I'm assuming. I don't care if it's Sentinel, I don't care if it's Microsoft, I don't care if it's CrowdStrike, I don't care if it's Trellix, I don't care who it is. But when's the last time you talked to them and said, okay, I want a report of this month's activity and who were the actors that targeted me the most? They should provide that for you because you're paying for it. And if you're paying for it, they should be able to tell you what they were trying to go after. When's the last time someone asked for that report? You should. It's nice to know who's attacking you and why, because then you can understand their techniques so you can protect your systems, right? Exercise, exercise, exercise. When I was a kid, there was a commercial, and there was this mechanic. And back then, there wasn't a lot under the hood. It was a hood and an engine. It was awesome, right? And the bigger engines, it was phenomenal, right? And they would come in, and this person would say, hey, I need to get my car serviced. And this engine, the mechanic would say, okay, it'll be however much. He said, that's too much. Guy walking away says, you can pay me now, or you can pay me later. And there's no doubt about that. You can exercise and harden today, pay that cost up front, or I can guarantee you when there's a breach, you're going to pay a lot more. A lot more. When we responded, does everybody remember when Baltimore got hit? Did you read, like, completely taken down? No 911 services, nothing. No ability to pay people, nothing. The entire thing was taken down by ransomware. It took over a year to get them fully reconstituted. You can imagine what that cost is to do that. But had certain things happened prior to, it would never have happened. Incident response is not a linear problem, it's not an easy problem. Your IR responders have to practice every single day. They have to know that environment. They should be threat hunting that environment. Your threat hunters should be your IR people if you don't have also some other company that's going to help you. You have to consider more than it's just about, hey, I got to get this machine up, or hey, the Bureau is asking for some kind of image they want to use, right? When do y'all practice your comms? Who actually has a comms crisis plan as part of their incident response plan? Hands up. One. At times of crisis, the adversary owns the communications, period, until you take it back. So how are you going to take it back? There's comms that are going to go to the media. There's comms that are going to go to the board and the CEO. There's comms that are going to go to the public because it was their stuff that was stolen. And most importantly, you got comms that are going to go to the employees because they don't know what to do next. Have you exercised and have that ready-made today so you're ready to go if it happens? Because it's a kick if you don't and you're not ready for it. And you're waiting days and days and days before you put out a message, and the adversary owns that day, and they own the next day, and they own the next day. And the media picks it up, and they own the next day. And you still haven't been able to put out anything that the legal people will agree to the street. Technical assurance. There is nothing better than hardening, period. Red team, red team, red team. Find out where your vulnerabilities are, remediate them as soon as you can. Learn your attack surface, okay? What's the answer to this question, right? Is it phishing? Is it external vulnerabilities? Or is it misuse of credentials that is the least successful? Exactly, right? What is the highest? External vulnerabilities, absolutely. Know your attack surface today. Understand what those critical points are, remediate them. Do this at least once per week. You will be amazed at what you discover. Validate your internal controls. Make sure all the pieces that from the beginning to the end are talking the way they should. It's not that these controls are bad. These companies are phenomenal at what they do. They're just not talking in the right way. So your responders can get the right information at the right time in the way they need it. 91% miss rate, that's not acceptable. Okay, really quickly, these are the things to key on, right? Access. Look at how that access looks, especially on your external facing assets, okay? Please, please, please separate non-privileged accounts. Active Directory is a huge target for these people, okay? When was the last time y'all did an Active Directory assessment? Right there, too, phenomenal. I gotta talk to you. Like, I know you have an answer for anything, but that's actually true. Gaining that AD access is monumental, and when they can, they own, period. Everybody remember SolarWinds? Anybody even hear of SolarWinds? Yeah. Amazing craft that was done in that. I mean, absent that it was really bad. But when Mandiant discovered SolarWinds, no government agency did, no signal intelligence agency did, no research, no other company did. And it had been out there for years. It's estimated that it took that country, they used over 1,500 people to do that, to craft that, to use that trusted access. How many have you validated that your third-party accesses, your trusted accesses, are truly secure and they're not being ridden by an adversary? Do y'all do third-party access evaluations? The easiest way to get in is through trust. Credentials, we've kind of talked about that through a little bit. Connectivity and focus areas. Watch on egress. They're there for a reason. They're there to do something. Please watch what's going out of your network more so than you're watching what's trying to attack you. You have kind of perimeter detections around that, but please look what's going out, right? That's kind of a hint. When you start seeing a RAR file that's about 10 gigs going out and it's encrypted, I mean, do y'all actually let encrypted RAR files out of your network? Shouldn't, right? That's a hit. Look at the value of what threat intelligence can provide. You cannot protect yourself from everything, every day, every minute. You're not there. And even if you are, you can't act faster than these computers can. Period. Have you actually evaluated your data that you're getting? Whatever you're using for, well, if you don't use threat intelligence and you use some company that has an EDR, how did you evaluate it? Was it the best in class for what you needed for your environment? Or did somebody just say you have to have this? And if they said you had to have this, did anybody actually read it? And did they validate that it's going to actually work the best in your environment? There are days, right? Cost rules, but so does value. It's worth some days paying a little bit more money to know that you're not going to be susceptible to this other thing that's going to cost you a lot more money, right? Validate what you're doing and understand what it's looked like. Understand your threats to your industry. Can everyone here tell me from your organization level today, who's the adversary most likely to target you? And I'm not talking about like China or Russia. I'm like down to the group. You should know that because they all have very unique techniques. And if you know what those techniques are, it makes protection a whole lot easier, right? Prioritize resources, threat intel, attack surface. Everything that you're doing to try to protect should inform all the priorities that you're going to do. They should. We know right now external vulnerabilities are number 1. We know they're going to go after your Active Directory, number 2. And we know that 3, can your SOC get the information they need? Right? Active Directory assessments are super cheap. Attack surface capabilities are super cheap. There is no reason not to know what these vulnerabilities can do to you and for you. And test your defenses. Test them, test them, test them. Know how hard you are against an environment or know where your areas that you get to improve. But I would rather to know today what that report's going to say about my breach tomorrow and have that in front of me so I can fix it. Because once that breach happens, you're done. And for a week, 2 weeks, or like another city, for a year, you're still going through remediation. That can be very hard on a lot of people, and not just by cost perspective, but you're serving the people, the constituents of these cities and counties and states. They deserve that service. When we start looking at leadership, have we really looked at even insiders? Have we looked at cyber risk management, right? How do we bring humans and technology better together? How are we doing zero trust today? What's our roadmap for it? I kid you not about zero trust. Like that train left last year, okay? Everyone should be on that journey today to do this. And there's so many benefits that you can get from it very quickly. Okay, on our website, if you ever go to mandiant.com, that we have tons of stuff you can look at. Like we write stuff for the federal government so they can put it out, okay? Take a look at some of these that are out there. Some of these are going to be very applicable to you. They're all free, okay? You can actually click a box saying, I don't want marketing, right? That's not what we're in for it, okay? But get some of these things about how to protect yourself, okay? It's all free. We don't charge for it. It's what's the right thing to do. I only have 60 seconds left because I talk too long. But I think, oh no, wait a minute. I get 15 more minutes. I'm very excited. Okay, questions. Anybody have questions about anything? Almost anything. I guess I should paraphrase that. Sir. Right here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did. I talked loud.
Back in my past, we exercised what we call disaster recovery exercises at least twice a year. How has this been integrated into that concept?
Yeah, I love disaster recovery, right? I love to exercise it either that we do from a tabletop exercise or we actually do it for real, right? So, not every organization has, hot sites or warm sites or cold sites. It's just the truth of today. I like to do tabletop exercises where they become very real, right? So, at Mandiant we have something, it's an emulation environment, okay? We call it threat space, right? And what we like to do is that for the more fun tabletop exercises that we do, you can have your executives in one room and they're not allowed to see or talk to anybody else, okay? Your IT group is going to be in another place, right? And then go put legal, maybe comms, and put them in another place. And then you're going to have your IT guy over here in threat space, and we're going to attack them. And for every decision that comes out of those other 3 rooms, we will do an impact based upon what they're going to try to adjust. That's actual real life. Testing your backups, be able to recover from those. What does it mean if you actually have destructive malware? I mean, we're not just talking about, hey, I've got a cloud backup, I'm going to be good. You may not have hardware or any virtual environment to even put it in. That's reality of today. But how do you do this? How often in here, just for fun, again, how often does anyone exercise, any of their response to anything? We even just start just like a basic response, okay? There's a business email compromise, okay? We're not even getting to ransomware or anything else, right? When's the last time y'all exercised it? Has it been, let's say under 12 months? Under 2 years? 3? Right? I mean, it's something you have to do. You have to have this plan. Do we all have an instant response plan? Do we actually know, if you have one, do you know where it is? Seriously, I'm not even kidding about that, because I know some that they put it away and they don't know where it is. Okay? It's really key. You have to know what this instant response plan is going to be from beginning to end. And it's not just the technical side. What's the executive's responsibilities? Who are they going to be notifying? Right? During Colonial, they had the White House calling. I don't know how many times you get the White House and Congress calling you, on top of the FBI and DHS and everybody else in the world, plus all the complaints they were getting because the East Coast was shut down. That was hard. And not to be funny or kidding, but y'all are on an island, right? There's a lot that you're going to have to do to make sure that you can keep up and be resilient at all times. The services here are critical to the people who live here. They're critical. Cybersecurity, it actually says security in the name, right? CISO actually has security in the name. Their job is security. It's not governance, it's not policy. Shouldn't be. It should be security. That's what they're supposed to do. That's what all of us are here to do, right? We should practice it all day long. In fact, you should practice in a real environment, a safe environment, but a real environment, and know what that looks like. It's okay. If there are failures or there's challenges or new things that are identified, that's great. Identify them now. No one's in trouble. But identify where you can improve for the next time, and do it every quarter. Every quarter, get a brown bag lunch, spend an hour or two, start going through it, and work your way up to a more official one. But take that time now. Don't try to figure it out later. There's no time to figure out crisis. When you're in the middle of the crisis, you're only going to react to how you've trained every day of the year. Next question. Sir.
How do military,
Yeah, I'm pretty loud too.
how does the military, the Navy's 10th Fleet, Army Cybersecurity, how do they figure into what you're talking about here? They're fairly robust now, they weren't even 2 years ago.
Yeah, okay, so Mandiant works a lot with the US government. Let's just put that straight to bed, okay? We really do. And, they have a mission, just like the FBI had a mission, the Department of Defense has a mission. But the Department of Defense's mission is everything outside of the United States. That's their space. Their space they cannot enforce or protect inside the United States, right? Your civilian agencies, Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, they can provide support, they can provide guidance, but they cannot touch your networks. Can't do it. Now, you can consent to providing them evidence, but they cannot be hands-on keyboard, right? By law. Okay? So who does that leave that can be hands-on keyboard? It's us. They do a phenomenal job, right? In my past life, I was highly integrated into the Department of Defense, okay? They have some phenomenal capabilities in what they're doing, and they're doing a lot to expose some of the challenges that we are having today and what we will probably have over the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? And they will do their very best to repel as much as they can, but their first mission set is to protect the DoDN, right? The Department of Defense networks. That's their first mission. Because if time of crisis or war, they have to be up, right? We have to all be up for the citizens that we protect. I've been in public service for over 3 decades. Even coming to Mandiant, I'm still in public. That's all my mission set is, right? And we have that responsibility. We don't get to give it to anybody else. It's not like when we go home, like somebody else gets this, it's still here, right? So we just have to do what we can, take some of those best steps, let's learn what the adversaries are doing, right? Protect against those first known steps, and then work our way to the next one. And then once we get that one done, we work to the next one, right? Next. Anything else? Awesome. All right, so I'm paid by the year, so I get to be here for a little bit longer. So if y'all have any questions, you want to come up and just talk one-to-one, I'll be here for a while, okay? Thank y'all very much.